Greetings to everyone. First, let me thank to Versopolis Review and Natasha Petershin-Pacheles for this invitation and an opportunity to contribute to the Festival of Hope. With our guests, Emina Bužinkić, Anna Vilenica, and Iva Marčetić, in this discussion, we will focus on practices of pirate care and experiences, actions, and demands emerging from these practices in the situation of COVID-19 pandemic. Pirate Care is a transnational network that was initiated a year and a half ago by Valeria Graziano, Marcel Mars, and myself, Tomislav Medak. The notion itself, Pirate Care, stands for collective practices that are pushing back against the various aspects of the neoliberal crisis of care. These practices help migrants survive at sea and land, provide pregnancy terminations where these are illegal, offer health support where institutions fail. They liberate knowledge where access is denied, and they collectivize care labor in imaginative ways. What these initiatives of pirate care share is often their willingness to disobey laws and executive orders, whenever such laws or executive orders stand in the way of safety and solidarity of humans. In late 2019, we have organized a collective writing retreat hosted by Drugo More within the program of Rijeka European Capital of Culture 2020. In this writing retreat, we have started to create a pirate care syllabus, a free digital tool meant for activating political pedagogies from these disobedient practices. The syllabus and its dedicated library catalog, which are both still very much work in progress, you can see here in the background, and you can visit the website by going to syllabus.pirate.care. We have launched the syllabus on March 8th, the International Women's Day, for the opening of What, How, and For Whom's exhibition of Bread, Wine, Cars, Security, and Peace at Kunsthalle Vienna. As we launched the syllabus, the pandemic was already bursting in our part of the world. Both the exhibition in Vienna and the ECO program, European Capital of Culture program in Rijeka, were suspended. But as everything stopped, we have decided to continue our work and rolled it over into a collective note-taking effort to document the unprecedented wave of organizing mutual aid and solidarity in response to the pandemic. We titled this effort, Flatten the Curve, Grow the Care. I'll show you the website of this topic, or the webpage of this topic. The title is intended to problematize the famous image here on the screen, depicting a graph of the outbreak, with two curves representing better or worse rates of contagion and an undefined healthcare capacity, represented as a straight line that the spread of the infection should not breach at any cost. From the perspective of syllabus written with our extended pirate care network only a few months earlier, much in what has been termed the biggest crisis of care of the century seemed not so new. The straight line in the graph was actually depicting the flatlining of the societal capacity of care under relentless neoliberal austerity. The pre-existing crisis, felt until recently only by vulnerable and disposable populations and visible through the lenses of class, race, and gender, suddenly detonated as a generalized social fact. In today's discussion, we will talk about this detonation with three practitioners of pirate care with whom we have written together on our syllabus. Emina has contributed a topic on criminalization of solidarity and migration, while Iva and Anna have contributed a topic on housing struggles. To say a couple of words on our guests today. Emina is a political activist exploring intersections of migration, education, racism, and solidarity. Her work revolves around the critical understanding of border regimes in schooling and everyday life. She is currently obtaining her PhD in critical studies in education and human rights at the University of Minnesota. Her work in Croatia is with the Center for Peace Studies, the Welcome Initiative, and the Taste of Home. Ana is urban and housing activist and freelance urban and cultural researcher. Among her research interests are issues of social reproduction, social movements, and protests on the EU border, as well as cultural and political action against dominant housing regimes and other urban regeneration schemes. She edited the book Becoming a Mother in Neoliberal Capitalism and co-edited books on the ruins of Creative City and art and housing struggles between art and political organizing. She is member of the Radical Housing Journal Collective and anti-eviction and housing organization KROV na glavu. Eva is an architect interested in building networks between activists, planners, and grassroots initiatives in an effort to democratize the practice of architecture and planning. For the last 15 years, she has been a part of the activist collectives and movements fighting against privatization of public resources in Croatia and other countries of former Yugoslavia. Eva works with Right to the City initiative in Zagreb as a community organizer and research for housing and urban planning. Hello, Emina. Hello, Anna. And hello, Eva. Thank you for being with us today. We will discuss today, as said, on the current situation of migrants and tenants and people whose security of home is a danger in this situation, but more generally. And I would maybe start by asking Emina to give us some idea on what is going on with refugees currently trapped on the Balkans route, so at the borders of the European Union, i.e. Croatia. I'm speaking today from Zagreb, and Emina is in Sisak, and Eva is in Zagreb as well, whereas Ana is in Pančevo. So basically that border is between us, and what is happening there in Bosnia, Serbia, and further southeast into Greece and Turkey.
Thank you, Tommy. First, I want to start by saying that with the start of pandemic, we have started a rather new initiative in the Balkans called Trans-Balkan Solidarity, where activists from different countries in the Balkans are daily communicating about these new situations and silences and tensions that are happening around refugee migrants that are being stuck currently in different countries of the Balkans. As we communicate daily, we also communicate with those who are stuck either in refugee camps or improvised places that they call shelters, and sometimes even called jungles. So this daily communication very much creates emerging knowledge about the current situation. For instance, one of the things that we are seeing every day is the increase of police, military, and institutional violence across the Balkans. It seems that the pandemic has brought health situation of majority of citizens and the measures that are being undertaken by governments more to the media, but what stays outside of the media, what is not really covered, what falls through is how certain populations are being treated. And this new situation as well has given wings to a repressive system to repress migrants and refugees. We know that currently today there are tens of thousands of migrants in the countries in the Balkans, and they do not have any type of institutional care except for the some refugee camps that are run by international organizations, which we have a lot of critique for. Many activists in the region called those centers concentration camps, and they draw parallels with the concentration camps that existed during the Second World War, by trying to say that people in the concentration camps were not just killed, but they were tortured and abused in different ways. So we are documenting different types of abuse and violence currently happening in those camps. I also here want to underline that refugees and migrants that are stuck in different camps or other places that we do not even have names for currently do not have access to food, they do not have access to water, and they do not have access to soap. And a few days ago, when a miner asked for soap in one of the refugee camps, military came inside the camp and actually organized a beating of people that were there because they thought they were demanding too much, and they demanded soap and pajamas and other goods inappropriately. That happened in Camp Krnjača, close to Belgrade. Also, a few days ago, we noticed that miners in Velika Kladuša camp decided to demand their rights after what they also got beaten. So the response to refugee and migrants' needs is not protection, is not giving soap and water to stay at least somewhat safe from the pandemic, but it's actually increase of violence. So that is something that I want to focus in a way in this conversation on, along with other aspects of hostility that has been pretty rooted politics in the Balkans currently against refugees and migrants. Here, I want to draw attention to two other examples. One is that during the pandemic, different authorities, educational authorities, have organized online schooling for children, but schooling actually is not accessible to many kids that are, for instance, refugee kids who do not speak Croatian or Serbian or Bosnian or other languages. Also, those kids have no tablets, they have no big cell phones or smartphones, they have no television. That also goes for Roma children and children of other national or ethnic minorities. So it seems that the pandemic has also shown us that some populations are really, excluded in explicit and sometimes more sophisticated ways. Of course, media and public does not have access to this, to understanding and knowing that some of these people, some of these children are being excluded again. This is a perpetual exclusion and perpetual illegalization in a way of those people. I also here want to mention that besides police violence and besides exclusion from schooling, there are other ways refugees and migrants are being excluded. Thinking here primarily of refugees that got asylum, have status, who have been forgotten during this particular situation. It has come to my attention that some of these people that have been living in the countries in the Balkans for a while but have not had access to learn language actually don't have access to news, where there is a repeated instruction not to go outside of the house, not to go to the stores if unnecessary, to wash their hands all the time, and so on. So all these health instructions that are coming out health-wise are not actually accessible to parts of population. So I'm gonna conclude this just again by saying that this is again a showcase of perpetual exclusion, where I would say under the this extreme conditions of pandemic, we should all be thinking more of the whole population rather than of parts of population. And as Trans-Balkan Solidarity Collective said, I'm just going to reiterate here, no one is safe until all are protected.
I'm going to come back in the second round to the question, what can be done? But let me just ask, what is the current situation of safety and epidemiological situations in the camps? I just saw today that a camp in Lebanon has had first cases of COVID-19, and what is the current situation on the Balkans route?
We don't have any official data about health conditions of refugees and migrants living in the Balkans in different official and non-official camps. We did hear the other day that there were about 150 asylum seekers that tested positive on COVID-19 in Greece. However, we don't have such health measures being deployed in the camps across the Balkans. So we actually do not know. We can only expect, knowing how pandemic, that there are many infected people currently.
Thank you, Emina. Anna, you've been working with doing ethnographic work, in fact, with the initiative known in Kitchen, which works from Šid, Velika Kladuša and Patras, helping, assisting refugees and migrants. And you've been also active with the initiative Združena akcija Krov nad glavom. So I don't know what's the official English name of the initiative, so you can say, but what's your reading of the situation? I know that you've been kind of in a forced isolation for now 28 days in Serbia, but still, I guess all of us have remained active through various information channels. Yeah, what's your reading of the situation, both in terms of migrants and refugees, but also more generally around issues of safety of home, regarding people not being able to pay their rent, not being able to pay their mortgage, or just being prior under threat of eviction by bailiffs, which is a particularly critical situation in Serbia.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tami, for this question. Just the name of Združena akcija Krov nad glavom is very complicated and hard to translate in English. So at the end, we decided to just call it the roof. So this is the official name in English. Yes, I have been doing research around housing and migration for the last, I don't know, like 5, 6, 7 years. And I've been also active in different initiatives tackling housing issues, both in Serbia and on the European level. And what is, I think, important to underline is that in this so-called crisis, the housing actually came into the focus in a very unprecedented way. So in order to deal with the situation of pandemics, after the, let's say, first round of austerity measures that started in 2008, would completely ruin the health protection system and also social housing system and social and housing protection systems. The demand was to go home, and this kind of measurements that was like one of the basic measurements to deal with this pandemic in the situation when very quickly the health system without capacity can be overwhelmed with patients. Those who are housed in, let's say, inappropriate way or don't have a roof over their head became the biggest victims of the way that our governments decided to manage the situation of quarantine that we are at the moment in. So the way that, for instance, in Serbia, the government decided to tackle this situation is by introducing the state of exception, which is like the maximum measurements. In Serbian, there is a curfew that is introduced. It starts at the moment at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Just a few days back, there was like a total curfew, like 24/7 for 4 days for the first time. And all the people above 65 are completely forbidden from leaving their homes. When the pandemic started, and the government decided to close the borders, many, people who were abroad either on temporary work jobs or just like tourism visiting or temporary migrant workers came back to the country, and this was the group that was blamed for like spreading disease in Serbia, and these people were given the 28 days quarantine under the threat of 3 years in prison and also 1,500 euros penalties. And I was one among these people, so that's why I stayed for 28 days in this forced quarantine. And I was, because of this, unable to kind of wholeheartedly take part in this, in the organizing around the new situation that the group that I have been working for 2 years now, called The Roof, was doing. So actually what happened, there was a lot of like talking about, like how we have these like pandemics in common and the virus in common and everything is all of a sudden like in common. But what I think is very important to underline, and this is something that Emina was already talking about, that this crisis only kind of boost the already existing inequalities and inequalities in housing specifically. So at the beginning of this crisis, the group that I'm associated with, The Roof, similarly to many other groups in Europe and worldwide, started like pressuring state to stop evictions, introduce other measurements for the people that were facing different economical difficulties because of the loss of jobs or other circumstances in this pandemic. So very quickly the state introduced the state kind of like advised private paid leaves to temporarily freeze the evictions, which at the end they decided to do. And they also introduced a kind of like temporary moratorium on paying mortgages to the banks, but it turned out to be that actually after these 3 months people will have to pay more in order to be able to go back into this cycle of repaying debts. But the people that are affected the most in this, because of this situation and these measurements, the group anti-eviction group Roof had to somehow like change its focus. And many people that we have been working with started reaching out for help. This is people that are living in very precarious conditions, very precarious housing situations, and many of them were facing lack of food and hunger, and the group kind of like decided to focus on this issue with the kind of like changed slogan: no one without the roof, no one hungry during the pandemics. Besides the already active members of the group. Many new people joined to help like distribute food during this situation. In parallel, also a solidarity kitchen emerged, which is something quite new in Serbia. We didn't have this kind of initiative before, and also a group that is particularly focusing on the people that are homeless, and this group is distributing daily hundreds of meals in the underground passage in Belgrade, where homeless people have been gathering for the past times. Regarding within this whole situation, like many other issues were also kind of like revealed. Activists that were going on the field to distribute food to families have been also facing other kinds of issues, like I don't know, like discrimination of health system, like racism of health system, complete inability of health system to deal like this complex this situation in a complex way that is kind of like demanded. So there was this situation that the activists that were distributing food to families in Dalmatinska Street that we have been already collaborating with because due to restitution they're facing eviction. They found a man with severe burns on his body who was completely abandoned and with severe infection. And the emergency didn't want to come because this was kind of like a Roma settlement, you know, like a place where the Roma families live. And then the activist actually, you know, like recorded the whole process and revealed these problems that are not anything new that was brought up by this situation, but it was amplified by this state of emergency. So yeah, maybe I can add something also regarding the migration and the things that Emina already mentioned. So in Serbia, all of the asylum seekers and except other facilities for refugees and migrants have been totally sealed with the start of pandemics. So these people are not able anymore. These facilities became some sort of like jails. These people are not allowed to go out and, you know, like do whatever they need to do. And also like previous places where there used to be like squats on the border, on the borders towards Croatia, Hungary, and Romania. Military and the police are now guarding the perimeter of these places, so people are not able to stay there and have to figure out, you know, like how to survive this situation. Regarding organizing, many activists, foreign activists that were working on the borders and in the migrant solidarity in Bosnia and Serbia actually had to leave the state when the emergency situation started. So now mostly activists from No Name Kitchen, for example, are relying on the local people to try to organize distribution of food that they have been tackling in a different way. So, for instance, now they have this initiative in Bosnia, No Name Bakery, where they gather amount of money and then pay it to local bakeries, and people then can come and collect food from these bakeries for the people that are living in the squats around these bakeries. And they also continue doing other things. They have an initiative, I think it's called Medicare on the Move. It's an initiative where individual people can help individual people traveling who have a need for medical care. And this is how they can learn more about their journey, also get to know better these situations and help people to, I don't know, like pay like dental costs or any other issues that they have on the way. Maybe this is good for like a beginning introduction.
Okay.
Going in depth.
Thank you, Anna. And switching to Eva, you've been fairly active with Right to the City as the pandemic started. You first put out sort of a list of demands for safety of home, an appeal to Croatian government, sort of an open letter for which you collected signatures, and you've also initiated a mutual aid group for tenants called Podstanari za Podstanare. So what is your reading of the situation of safety of home in Croatia at the moment? Just for information, there was a relatively strong earthquake that struck Zagreb on the 22nd of March, if I'm not mistaken. And there was an aftershock today as well. So the two things converged, both the pandemic and the earthquake, to aggravate the situation of people with housing in general, but tenants in particular.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Tommy. Yes, well, in Zagreb, two things converged, the earthquake and pandemic. But as Emina and Anna were talking about before, many inequalities were converging before that. So they just were amplified by this situation. So as we have been working with tenants on the private market here in Croatia and Zagreb, we immediately knew that once the orders of quarantine started, that there is going to be a very heavy period of tenants not being able to pay rent, and we knew that they are not, or should I say, we are not very protected or at all protected by the institutions. So what we first did is, as you mentioned, we appeal to the government and all the cities and local municipalities in Croatia to enable what we call safety of home for different kind of groups. This was also including people in mortgages, but also homeless groups and homeless people. And what we actually proposed was to stop evictions immediately. I mean, that is like a ground zero point when it comes to housing in these situations that we are living. You have to absolutely stop all evictions. And what we have seen from other parts of the world is that in some instances this was actually stopped. There were like decisions that stopped all evictions. But on the other hand, what we and all the activists around the world fear is once you stop evictions, if you don't stop payments of rents or lowering the height of the rent, then you're going to have a lot of debt from which people are not going to be able to get out from. So we also asked for assessing these situations and lowering rents and proposing to lower rents or discard rents during the pandemic. And also we proposed that public resources, public housing units and different kind of public institutions or public buildings be used to house almost around 2,000 unhoused people in Croatia. With all of these demands, we actually were created through our networks of either experts in and activists when it comes to mortgage questions, but also those that are organizations dealing with homeless and our own experience. What we do also know is that tenants in the private market are not represented in any kind of way, unlike these other groups. So then we decided to, at the same time, create this kind of a mutual aid group that was going to, we just organized around Facebook, and just to kind of open a channel where people can talk about these problems and what they're facing. What we are learning also, well, we knew this before, but there is this problem, there is a difference between the way that people perceive private renting in this part of Europe in comparison to the Western Europe or America, is that there is a lot of shame assigned to it. Like if you're renting, then you're kind of unsuccessful or poor or whatever. So one of the things that we try to do first is to inform people about what are their legal rights, because there's a lot of confusion about that, but also to kind of try and understand and get the conversation going around being able to demand more rights. So one of the most interesting things that we have been asked about, and majority of questions at first were like this: is it morally okay that I ask my landlord to lower my rent? So what we are doing, so those were the first cases, but now we get more and more cases of people being evicted illegally, horribly, and things like that. So we are in constant communication with people. They're more writing into our like inbox chat than they're willing to go public. There is not much possibility of organizing action still. But we are working on what we can do, and that is conversing with people and trying to figure out with them what is their line of defense, be it a legal one, or we offer also to speak with landlords and things like that. And also we are now converging with one of the groups that helps migrants and asylum seekers. Are you serious? Where we are talking about actually organizing, converging our volunteers, or also teaching volunteers of Are You Serious to negotiate with landlords, and teaching them like these basic things about rent and about the tenants' rights, so they could actually help those who are in such apartments, like asylum seekers, or those who already got asylum but were actually lost their jobs during this crisis. One of the things we did not want to do from our end was to create funds to collect money for rents, and also what we have also proposed to the government was, well, the argumentation was that this is a health crisis, and housing, not having a house, a secure home, is a question of health, and we should see it from that perspective. And if landlord is losing their needed monthly income due to loss of rents being paid, then this landlord his or her situation should be looked at from the position of labor, or a position of getting your monthly sustenance, and not through position of somebody who is owed some money from the renter. So that was kind of our position, and we remain there. But there are some groups that are particularly hard hit. So there is a fund that is being organized on the other side, like through Are You Serious and some other funds, which is going to start to work soon, to collect money for rents, but also converge with this kind of building up knowledge and negotiations powers with landlords. So that's, yeah.
Thank you,
about
Eva.
it.
We don't have much time left, so I would just go for a shorter concluding round. And I know that Emina has to leave very soon. In fact, she had to already leave in 5 minutes ago. So I would just give her, ask Emina, what are we to do? How we can help people who find themselves currently cordoned off in camps and asylum homes. So how to help those organizing, and what are the other ways to help in this situation?
Yes, I think, I have a very simple thing to say, which is probably sounds more simple when we hear it than to act. But I think we should listen to people calling us and sending us messages from these different camps and these different settlements and whatever they are. People are sending messages daily. They are sending pictures and recording what's happening to them. And I think we shouldn't be just practical, and make it easier for us and say we can't do anything here, but we should get engaged into communication with those who are asking, who are urging us to do something more publicly. So that's one thing that we could do. The other thing, I think both Anna and Eva gave very practical examples of what could be done. No Name Kitchen, No Name Bakery, Solidarity Kitchen, Roof, Tenants for Tenants, all of those are initiatives where people are understanding what does solidarity mean and understand that solidarity is the only thing that is going to pull us out of this current situation. I'm also sort of calling for citizens and activists and all the others who want to join Trans-Balkan Solidarity to help uncover all these troubling situations for refugees and migrants, and to keep working publicly to raise this voice against, against complicity in this violence, in this institutional crime and institutional exploitation, exclusion of these people.
Did we lost Tom?
I've been only figuring out the screen sharing during this conversation. So I've been only now zooming it in full screen. And I'll go through the pages that we've shown previously as we do the concluding round. Emina, if you have to go, thank you so much for joining us today. And Anna, obviously there will be a protracted crisis, both within the pandemic that might last for a while. We are now just seeing the first wave of outbreaks, but also once the pandemic is over, there will be a serious economic downturn and the need to ramp up organizing. Our organizations already on it, and what are your thoughts? How do we prepare for what's coming and how we can intervene, politicize, think about transforming the larger context wherein the crisis of housing is happening and the crisis of migration is happening?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that what we should do at this point is try to figure out how to bring some of this corona emergency into this future normality. I mean, there is no return to normality because the normality was not something that we really want to return to, neither it's going to be possible to return there. But I think that we need to figure out how to keep some of the things that kind of became very obvious in this situation. I mean, one of the downturns, possible downturns of this crisis is definitely going to be the escalation of individual debt. This is how I see it, because now people are spending their savings, and because the welfare system doesn't really exist on the periphery. I mean, the welfare system is actually microcrediting, so people will definitely go for more, more loans and more debt from banks. And I mean, and regarding housing, like one of the things that could potentially happen is that the level, the scale of evictions will even increase even more than it was before, because people will take these loans and they will not be able to give them back, and then the bailiffs will sell their homes on the auctions and so on and so forth. And I mean, the important thing to kind of like mention is that this is actually what International Monetary Fund and European Union always wanted from the peripheral state that has like a high home ownership, like Serbia, to decrease home ownership. And I think this is also, you know, like something that is possible to take advantage from. I mean, this situation with debt. So this is like maybe something that like a projection of the future. But what I wanted to add to what I already previously said is that I mean, regarding the work of the roof, it's not only the mutual aid that the organization is focusing at the moment. It is also trying to politicize this crisis and to show how state was mismanaging this quarantine and pandemics in the way that it completely left out, you know, like some parts of society and the people that are at the very bottom of the social ladder. So besides doing mutual aid and distributing food, the roof was campaigning for instance, reconnecting electricity to people who were disconnected for electricity grid because of their debt to the electric company, as well as pressing the state to house homeless people in empty hotels, as well as introducing the third crisis headquarters. At the moment in Serbia, there is two crisis headquarters. One is dealing with the economic consequences of these pandemics, and the other one is dealing with the health situation. And the roof claims actually that we need a third headquarters that will tackle these social issues that nobody is tackling at the moment. Yeah, this is what I wanted to add.
After a small technical malfunction, to conclude with Eva, elections are also coming up in Croatia, and there is obviously a lot of political organizing at the local level that also feeds into various political platforms, or one political platform that you are also a member of, Zagreb Naš. With the earthquake and the pandemic, the issue of safety of home has kind of been pushed to the sort of forefront. Where do you see process of politicization going forward now?
Well, I would be like, there is a question of housing and security of home is something that process of politicization of this question for now is in the city of Zagreb actually very much has to do with the question of the earthquake and the institutional response of the city. What we have witnessed is the city disintegrating. Well, the city was previously disintegrated its institutions and such, but you know, this situation of extreme crisis has actually shown that in very short period of time all the failings of the system. So where I see possibility of there is a clear need for security of housing, for regulating private rent, but also question of the properties that were lost due to earthquake and that belong to those who have no finances to repair them. Those questions are very real and very present right now. So in terms of politicization of this issue, we have been pushing for a discussion about public housing and publicly owned apartments that are not used in a system as they should, a system that would be like a relief system, a system that could grant apartments to those who are really in need. So in terms that is in terms of say discussion and advocacy, and something that I think political platforms should adapt about how we need a security system of housing, how we need a system that is similar to health systems, something that could be resilient to the market, resilient to the crashes that we are having, something that needs to be a part of a clear solidarity scheme. So I think that's something that is supposed that it ought to be politicized by left-leaning platforms and for the upcoming election. Election is still a year away, so we will see how this crisis will play into it. What we are seeing, there's a lot of anger in the streets, well, in the houses. A lot of anger towards our city administration. But what we are trying on the activist part to do is to kind of steer that anger towards some kind of clear-cut political message that we need a city that is actually working for the common good. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Anna. Zagreb these days does look dystopian, particularly the center of the town when you walk in empty streets and there's rubble everywhere. Hopefully, with all the organizing and the solidarity that people around Right to the City and Zagreb and Naš have been putting into helping people who have found themselves with their homes transformed into the rubble, we'll also see that transforming into sort of larger political demands and claims and successes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I thank you for, do say.
I just wanted to add that it's not just like that there's been a huge solidarity network kind of kick in after all these issues, and it's very after all these things that happen, and it's very clear that the only ones who are not actually being able to answer all of these crises are the institutions, and we have had a flood of different kind of reflexes that come either from the people through solidarity and mutual aid helps, mutual aid networks, or even from the experts, from the engineers. There's a lot of reflex in the society, I would say, to actually build networks that can work. It is the question of how much a political agenda would be able to transfer it into a real system, I'd say.
Yeah, I agree. No, there is a permanent neglect of care and duty on the side of institutions due to political capture, but also due to the larger economic framework. And we do see in across larger set of pirate care practices that sort of self-organizing is the constant, and it's not an exception that easily flows into institutional framework and transforms larger society that easily, but it's still there and provides for social resilience that institutions do not, and probably in this framework not. Yeah. Okay, Eva, thank you for the discussion. Anna and Emina had to leave earlier. So before I just say goodbye, Anna has asked me to announce the upcoming issue of the Radical Housing Journal that will be covering issues raised by the current pandemic. And I invite you to go to their webpage and see the call and consider submitting. Thank you for listening, and yeah, let me just stop sharing the screen and just wave bye. Ciao.